South China Sea, 1801. You are nobody, a low-level sailor on a trading junk. You move silk and tea and dried fish. You spend your days checking knots and your nights sleeping on a burlap sack that smells like brine. You keep your head down. You stay alive. That is your whole plan. Stay alive. Then, the red flag fleet takes your ship. It happens at 4 a.m. No cannons, just shadows and steel. You're pushed onto the main deck with 30 other terrified sailors. And then, she walks on board. You think she is a captive being brought to the captain. Then you realize everyone is looking for her orders. Her name is Ching Shih. She is 26 years old. She runs 300 ships. She is looking at the crew in your captured vessel the way a general looks at new recruits, or how a chef looks at ingredients. Her eyes stop on you for about 3 seconds. You feel like a bug under a magnifying glass. Then she moves on. Later, that night, a man with a scar across his throat finds you below deck. He says she wants to talk to you. You follow him, because when the woman who owns the ocean calls, you don't check your schedule. She asks you 5 questions in a voice as calm as a merchant discussing the price of rice. She wants to know if you can navigate at night. You say yes, if you can read the weather, or if you know the currents of the Pearl River. You know these things. Then she asks if you steal from your captain. You tell her no. She pauses, leaning in until you can smell jasmine and gunpowder, and asks why not. You tell her the truth, because it's wrong and because you're too tired to hide things. She studies you for a long moment, her expression unreadable while you sweat. She asks for your name, and when you give it, she simply nods and tells you that you're part of the fleet now, and to try not to be a disappointment. She has rules, not suggestions, not guidelines, rules. You learn them fast because on her ships, the alternative to following the law isn't a fine, it's an ending. If you take treasure for yourself before it is divided, death. If you desert your post or go AWOL, your ears get cut off. Second time, death. If you assault a female captive, death. No exceptions, no appeals. No, he was a good sailor. You have served under cruel captains who enjoyed the whip. You have served under soft captains who let the crew rot. You have never served under someone whose rules made this much sense. The fleet does not rob its own. The fleet does not abuse its own. You realize very quickly that in 1801 on the South China Sea, Ching Shih's fleet is the safest place for a woman to live. It says something about the civilized world you left behind. It says that the people on land are the real monsters. You do not propose. You don't get down on one knee. That isn't how it works here. 6 months in, after you've proven you can handle storms that turn other men's hair white, she finds you on deck during a midnight watch. She stands next to you watching the sliver of a silver moon and notes that you haven't stolen a thing or told her a single lie. She tells you that while the other commanders think you're boring, she thinks you're steady. Then, without any romantic music or a big speech, she tells you she is going to marry you because she needs one person in the fleet who doesn't want her job. She asks if you have a reason she shouldn't. You think about your old life of moving dried fish and tell her there's no reason at all. She just nods and goes back to her cabin. 3 days later, with 1,500 sailors watching, you're married to the most powerful pirate in history. You still feel like a nobody, but you're starting to realize that a useful, honest nobody is exactly what she needed. She didn't need a hero. She needed a home. You thought you'd be a prince. You were wrong. What you actually are is a human anchor. You aren't the commander. She has those. She has men who would burn a city for a bag of gold. What you are is the person she talks to at 3 a.m. when she hasn't slept in 40 hours, when the Chinese Navy sends another fleet and she defeats them in a 6-hour battle that turns the water red. She does not celebrate with the crew. She doesn't drink the captured wine. She comes to find you. She sits down. She's quiet for a while, the smoke still clinging to her clothes. Then she tells you what went wrong, what she would do differently. The wind shifted. I was slow to react. 3 ships were lost because I was arrogant. You listen. You ask questions. You don't reassure her with lies. You just tell her the truth. The Portuguese colonial fleet thinks they have her cornered in a bay with 14 warships. They think she's just a pirate woman. You watch her move her ships like pieces on a game board, her voice never rising and her hands never shaking. By sunrise, 9 of their ships are taken and the rest are running. She walks back to you covered in soot, looking like a ghost. She sits on a coil of rope, stays quiet for a long time, and then simply asks what you had for dinner. You tell her it was rice and some salted fish. She asks if the fish was any good, and when you tell her it was a bit too salty, she just nods, leans her heavy head against your shoulder, and tells you that's good. You've just watched her humiliating empire, and she just wants to know about the salt in the fish. This is your life now. Eventually, the emperor realizes he can't win and makes a deal. She negotiates her own terms, keeps the money, and gets pardons for her sailors. She walks away from a criminal empire on her own schedule. At the signing table, surrounded by sweating generals, she's the only one who looks comfortable. You were a sailor who kept his head down to stay alive. You're still a nobody who has never fired a cannon, but you're the person Ching Shih comes home to. The fleet respects you the way they respect a lighthouse, not because they fear you, but because you're the thing that holds. You used to think you needed to be impressive to matter, but you just needed to be honest, useful, and still there. It turns out, those are the rarest treasures in the world.